Hi, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for joining. I'm going to do just like a quick test and verify that people can hear me from this meeting room. Jason, raise your hand if you can hear me. Nice. Very cool. Oh, thank you, everyone, for raising your hands. Good stuff. I'm so excited to kick this off. This is actually the first of our educational webinars that we're doing. Yeah, we've had a lot of questions, particularly about, hey, I'm a student. How do I use Notebook LM for school, for class? And a lot of questions around even specific subjects or areas of study. And so today I'm hoping to answer a lot of the commonly asked questions. Stephen's going to talk about some use cases. We are going to walk through some of our unreleased features that we're hoping to launch later this year. And so we've got a really packed agenda. So we'll kick this off just by saying hello and thank you for joining. I think the Discord has been such a fun place for us to get to know you all, learn about what's going on with Notebook LM, hear about issues up front, and just wanted to say at the top of this meeting that, we really appreciate you. And hopefully, we hear more from you, especially as we sort of get through this material. There's some opportunities, I think, for us to connect further. We're launching a few programs, particularly for students and educators, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk through. I said it at the top, but I'm going to go through the FAQs, the use cases, the sneak peek, and then we'll go into Q&A. A lot of you submitted questions. We won't be able to get through them, but I did try to pick the ones that had kind of some common themes. Okay, one request is if you could not record or take photos, especially since we're doing sneak previews of unreleased features, I would really appreciate it. And I'll kick it off just to do this really quickly. I know you probably hear a lot from myself. I'm Riza. Oliver, sorry, I'm gesturing to him, but he's not a skunk in real life, and Stephen in the Discord, but there's a lot of people that work on the Notebook LM team. We've got Yi on the call, we've got Jason, we've got Yasul, we've got Justin. And so all of us here are super excited to chat with you today. Okay. With that said, Yi is actually going to ask a lot of different questions through the polls. Just to learn more about you and like the attendance of folks who are joining these webinars. And we'll use a lot of this data to improve how we structure these along the way as well. Okay, with that said, I'm going to jump into this. First, FAQs. This is one of the top questions. I think we hear about it a lot, particularly from new users. So how do you access Notebook LM? The notebooklm.google.com is the link that takes you straight to the app. If for whatever reason you get an error when you go to the webpage, it's usually one of two things. Your country is not supported or the particular region that you're in. And there's going to be, we'll drop a link here so you can take a look at what countries and regions are supported. But the second thing is more often than not, you're using a school or work managed account. So for example, for me, right, like I use my google.com address. There is an administrator who basically decides what websites or apps I can use with that account. And so in this case, if you're using a school or work managed one, there's usually some complexity around accessing Notebook LM because today Notebook LM is considered an early access application. And so if you don't have access, you may have to talk to your admin, or if you're just trying to test it out and use it with your materials, just use Gmail when in doubt. If you have any further questions here, feel free to drop it in the Discord chat, or if you're like, hey, I've tried this, I turned early access on, I still don't have access, drop those in the Discord chat and we'll try to get you helped out as much as we can. Okay. Next FAQ, I see this a lot. It came up a lot in actually the survey as well. People want to know how to change NotebookLM's language, and we officially support up to 35 languages. However, you do have to change the language in this particular link. And Yi is actually dropping the links in the chat, both for what countries are supported and what languages, how to change your language. You do have to change it in this link. It's not good enough to tell NotebookLM, hey, answer the question in German or answer it in Spanish. Like that might work sometimes, but for the most part, this is the most reliable way to do it. Okay, this one comes up a lot too, which is for PDF support. I know this is overwhelmingly like the source that people want to use. Then there's a couple of ways to figure out like how to make PDFs work. Now, let me take a step back and caveat that with the PDF work is just going to keep improving. We are in the very early days still of like what we can and can't support. And so you'll see that it's a little bit clunky. But the first test really of whether or not a PDF is going to work in NotebookLM is, hey, if I open this PDF in preview for a Mac or whatever viewer in Chrome, can I highlight the text with my cursor? And if you can highlight the text with your cursor, it's going to work in NotebookLM, right? However, we also just recently enabled image-based PDFs, where if you have a PDF and it happens to be all images or pictures or scans, that will work too. Now, some of you, I think, may have already noticed that if you have a combination of both of these, it only kind of works. It's still a little bit janky, and this is on the roadmap for us to improve. So right now, it's kind of like one or the other, but the next thing is obviously making both of those things work. Anything else you'd add on the PDF?
I think the PDF stuff it's rolling out, right? Image-based.
There's an experiment that's active today. Some users may get this behavior that we're like testing. I think the crux of the understanding people should have is that if you have a PDF that's like a mixed media, like a classic example would be like a textbook, those actually like still need some work on our end for like full kind of like proper multimodal support. It's just a fundamentally harder problem than handling pure images like a scan. So we're working on it, right? Like that one's not live.
We will update the Discord as the PDF support increases because we know that may be the #1 source that people are using, and so we want to make sure that anything we improve we announce there. So check the announcements.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's keep going. This one is another one that I see quite a bit, which is summarize this source doesn't work. Like the particular query that when you first, try NotebookLM and you try to have it summarized and it doesn't work and it's upsetting. One of the things I wanted to talk through, and Stephen and Oliver also chime in, is that NotebookLM has two different modes of operation, right? On one hand, we will sometimes retrieve the relevant passages from your sources before we give you the answer, or we sometimes utilize the entire source to construct the answer. Now, it's not obvious to people who are using NotebookLM when NotebookLM is doing one or the other. And so we can talk a little bit more about how to tell the difference, but again, taking a step back, this is something that we're working on just enabling to work out of the box, right? Like this is not something we expect you to know. This is not something that I hope you hold in your mind forever as you use NotebookLM, but kind of just a little bit of explanation as to why sometimes it works well and sometimes it doesn't. I will say before we talk a little bit more detail about how this works, something of note is that the source guide always has a summary of a source. And so when you look at your sources in the left-hand panel, when you click on one of them, you'll see the bar for source guide. And if you open it, there's always a summary there and always key topics. Okay, Oliver or Stephen, anything you would add particularly for this query, this type of query?
Yeah, maybe it's helpful to just sort of clarify, I think, what you were getting at, which is the end goal here is that users shouldn't really have to think about how the system operates. And we'd like to end up in a place where you can type summarize this source and you don't need to know what's happening and it just works perfectly. The reality is that today it is actually sort of helpful to know some of the nuances of how the system works. So the examples Raz was giving was if you have a very small corpus, like you have a notebook with a single source, it's very short. There's not really much nuance to how this system works. We can feed all of the information into the AI model. And so a query like summarize the source will work pretty well. If you have a really large corpus, right, like you have a few million words or something in your notebook, this is when we need to do like the more traditional RAGs, kind of quote unquote RAG steps where we do some semantic matching and we retrieve chunks of the sources that we think are relevant. So if you kind of imagine that's how this is happening and you type summarize this source, you don't tend to get good quality matches for the material in your sources. So you can get an answer, but it's generally not, it's not very representative of the sort of overall themes. When we talk about the source guide that we were showing, right, that you get on your source by default or the notebook guide, we have like some fairly complex logic that happens on our end to generate this in a way that's representative of all the kind of key topics and concepts. It's not just like a trivial, like, summarize this source prompt. So I think that's maybe a good thing to consider here is just kind of like, if you're working on a really large notebook, today it is helpful to kind of know that there's this semantic kind of retrieval step that happens. And so you want to have your query have some kind of semantic matching and you can't really rely on like, yeah, these really general themes.
I mean, basically, the way to think about it is, when you have a lot of source material, instead of saying summarize these sources, say summarize what these sources say about dogs or what these sources say about the Cold War. And then it will find the relevant passages on that theme and you will get much more accurate assessments of what's in the source material.
Yeah, and so in general, I would say the tip is really more specific queries work better,
Yeah.
right? Think about it as there's two steps here. The first is we are going to look for the most relevant passages in all of your sources. And so the specific queries will help us find those, very similar to how search works. And then the second step is once we've retrieved the relevant passages, so just chunks of stuff from your documents, that's what we're going to hand to the LLM and say, here's the stuff that's most relevant to this user's particular query. And so there's a lot of questions about how NotebookLM works or how queries work or what queries work best. Think about it in this like sort of two-pass workflow, right? Which is first it does a search and then it, references your query. And again, really, this is not the sort of thing that we expect you to really know or continue doing. This is more just because we get a lot of questions about it. This is how it works. Okay. Now we're going to jump into the learner use cases. And we've actually, a lot of these we've heard from you is how you're trying to use it. And this is where we've gotten a lot of ideas as well. But I'm going to hand it over to Stephen, who is going to share his screen and his NotebookLM.
Thanks, Reza. Okay, really excited to share this stuff with you all. Just gonna share. This is briefly gonna look weird. Okay, did that work? There we go.
There it is.
Okay, yeah, just I'm Stephen Johnson, editorial director here at NotebookLM. You've seen me in the Discord. Love all the amazing use cases we're seeing from everybody there and all the feedback. This is really exciting to get to talk to you all. So what I'm going to do is kind of walk through in detail a kind of a sample notebook that I've created that I think is a good way to think about using NotebookLM in an education context as a student, as a learner. I think the most logical way to organize your notebooks, at least as a kind of a base structure, is to organize them by your classes if you are enrolled in school somewhere. And so here I've created a notebook for an American history class. You might have situations where you're working on a very big project, or you're writing a dissertation, or you're writing a kind of end of year kind of thesis paper or something like that. And you might want to create a notebook just for that because you're going to have a lot of sources for that one particular project. But in general, I think a notebook maps really nicely onto a course. And so in this case, I've loaded up 4 chapters and some primary source material from an open source textbook on American history called The American Yawp. And you can see here I brought in, this is chapter 1 on Indigenous America. This is the source guide we talked about before. The source is here, so you can read through the source. You can grab quotes from the source if you want. You can take notes on the material. In this case, I've created some class lecture notes on smallpox, which is a very exciting topic. And taking a couple of other notes. So basically I brought in source material. It could be PDFs, it could be docs or slides, it could be text files, it could be web URLs, all the main source materials that we support. You can see them here. We're adding more and more of these, and as we said, we're going to be expanding the way that we handle PDFs. I'm going to show you a little preview of that coming up. Now, one of the first things that you want to do, that's a new feature that we introduced a few months ago that we're really excited about, we're seeing a lot of usage of, is to open up Notebook Guide. And you're going to get a little preview of what Notebook Guide is going to look like in the next couple of weeks here. And what I want to point you to here is these pre-formatted guides that we have, FAQ, study guide, table of contents, timeline, and briefing doc. And what these do is they take all your sources in the notebook and they will generate a kind of long format document structured as a note in these various different formats. And this is a great way to get started with your material. You load in a bunch of sources, you're trying to figure out what's in there. Generating a FAQ doc will give you, kind of that format. In this case, I've created a study guide, and this gives you a sense of what the study guide looks like. It has a series of kind of short answer questions, 10 questions based on the material that you've uploaded. It gives you an answer key for those 10 questions. It gives you long format essay questions. It doesn't help you answer those, but it helps you think about the material. And then it gives you a glossary of key terms. So this is just like out of the gate, it will always kind of generate a document in that format. So these guides are super helpful in just kind of getting your bearings. You can recreate these guides with a smaller subset of sources anytime you want, just using the chat feature. So you could go in and deselect some of these sources and just focus on one particular chapter if you wanted to. This is how you focus the model on the documents that you really are working with at that particular moment in time. So you could just select one chapter and say, create a study guide with long format questions and a glossary, and it will do the same thing as you see in the notebook guides there. So I want to talk about the chat features. And I think most of you probably have spent a little bit of time with Notebook Elements, so you understand the idea that when you have these sources selected, when you are focused on them, you can see down here in this left-hand corner, it says 10 sources down here. So that means that there are 10 sources selected. The model, the AI is focused on those selected sources. At that point, you can ask questions, ask factual questions, ask for kind of thematic overviews. I think most of you have experienced that. But I wanted to showcase a couple of other uses that may not be as obvious that I think are really valuable in the student use case. And I've kind of preloaded them in the chat here. So one thing is to help you brainstorm ideas for things that you're working on. So here's a query that I put in, which is, I said, help me brainstorm ideas for the rest of this paper based on this opening paragraph. So I've written in a note an opening paragraph about the Columbian Exchange. So I've got a general idea of the paper that I want to write. And I paste in that quote, and I ask for Notebook Element to help me brainstorm here. It's not just answering a question, it's helping kind of suggest different routes that I could take with this paper. And so you can see it creates this really nice overview with suggested ideas for the rest of the paper. I could talk about the exchange of plants, I could talk about the exchange of animals, I could talk about the impact of disease. As you all probably know, at any point, there are these citations here that help you figure out what passages are relevant to that particular idea. And then I can ask a follow-up question. Let's say I think that the exchange of animals is a particularly interesting topic that I want. So I could say something like, give me 2 key quotes from the sources about the impact of disease, sorry. Give me 2 key quotes from the sources about the impact of disease and a list of key facts. So I'm interested in exploring that particular suggestion about the impact of disease. It gives me 2 great quotes. I can see the citations for them, and it gives me a list of facts. And so it's almost like creating the beginnings of an outline that I can then wrap my paper around. I could copy that. I can copy this down here and paste into Docs, for instance, if I want to write in Docs, or I can always pin this note. If I find it interesting, I can just hit pin and it will save it to my noteboard here and I can revisit it at a later point. So that's an example of kind of using it in kind of brainstorming writing mode. I also want to show you, this is really cool. You can also use it to fact check your final papers. You can only do this right now with kind of smaller blocks of text, so you want to do it kind of a couple of paragraphs at a time. But let's say you've written a long paragraph for your paper and you want to make sure that it's factually correct. So I've written this 2-paragraph thing here about the arrival of Europeans. I've deliberately made 2 mistakes in here. I want you to know that I did this on purpose. I did not think that Europeans brought buffaloes to America. So then I just say, fact check the following text and suggest any improvements needed, right? And so it goes through based on my sources. It says the provided text is largely accurate, but here's a fact check with suggested improvements. It flags that I got buffaloes wrong. It suggests a better phrasing of that. It also flags that I got the kind of story about European crops slightly wrong, and it suggests improvements. And then it says the rest of the provided text is accurate according to the sources. So that's something like, you know, being able to use a large language model to actually make your work more accurate is one of the great things about NotebookLM, because we have those sources always available. You're always grounded in the source material. Now, this is a preview of something that is rolling out over the next week or two, which is we are going to extend what's called the conversation history in the chat. So some of you may have noticed that in general, NotebookLM has historically only remembered the last turn of the conversation that you had. So if you refer to something that happened 3 or 4 turns in the conversation, NotebookLM will not remember that. Now we are going to extend it to something like 20 turns in the conversation. And this lets you do some really cool things. So you can go from asking questions to NotebookLM to actually having NotebookLM ask you questions. I like to do this thing where I say, I'd like you to quiz me on this material with 3 multiple choice questions. Ask me 1 question, let me answer, then evaluate my answer and ask me the second question. So it becomes a kind of like interactive tutor for you in a way. And so I went through and did a few multiple choice questions here. I answered this first one correctly about European diseases. Sorry about all the disease focus on this demo. I answer the next one incorrectly. I say D when the answer was sugar, and it explains why I got it wrong. It gave me a very easy third question, which is, which European power, known for its advanced capitalist system, initially established the colony of New Netherlands? And the options are England, France, the Netherlands, or Spain. So if you get that wrong, you should be concerned. But anyway, I answered it correctly. And then I could say, now based on the accuracy of my answers, suggest some sections of the course materials that I should read to brush up on my knowledge. And this is another great use of NotebookLM, which is when you dump in a lot of material to say, hey, I'm interested in this topic, which part should I read? And it can create a kind of reader's guide for you. So here it's saying, listen, Stephen, you got that answer about sugar wrong. So you should really brush up on the material about sugar. And then I can just click on any of these citations and go directly to that passage and read more about sugar so I can get educated and have a better understanding of the material going forward. So those are just examples of ways in which you can get beyond just the straight Q&A, like I'm asking a factual question and getting a factual response. And we're going to make it much easier, particularly on the writing side, as you'll see, for expanding that. Now, I just want to preview. No, actually, that's all I'm going to show now. I'm going to do a little preview in a little bit. Those are the main use cases for learning right now.
So cool. Thank you, Stephen. I was so excited by the quiz thing. I was just thinking about how before NotebookLM, I actually myself used to make quizzes for myself. Like that used to be my study mode, is I would read a chapter and I would like write fake questions. I mean, I was really just pretending to be my own professor to try to like really study up on the material. So it's so exciting, I think, to see how we could use AI in this particular way. Okay. Before we jump into the sneak preview section, I want to flash up a couple of links. Yisol, I don't know if you want to talk through these, but let me just move the camera over in a second.
Great. So thank you, everyone. And Yeah, you just mentioned, I know there's like a lot of questions and hands up, but we'll try to get those addressed later in the call. So we think Notebook is great for students, and I think based on the poll, there's also some educators who joined the webinar today. There's also a webinar focused on educators tomorrow, but we're launching these ambassador programs and essentially for students and for educators. And we would love for you to consider the opportunity to join these programs to really get to know Notebook better, to use it as part of your learning or your studying or as an educator, your teaching process, and essentially just, learn better. And so there's a few forms here included. This is for the one for the Student Ambassador Program, and I think you will send the links out as well, or you can just like take a, I guess like a photo with your phone. Then there's also a link for the Educator Ambassador Program on the next slide as well. And the links will be shared out. The Educator Program is really focused on how do you amplify yourself as an educator and adopt technology to guide the next generation. So please, if you're interested, please join the forum, and then we'll send more information out to those who are interested in joining.
Thank you. And plug, we're actually doing the same webinar tomorrow, but more with an educator focus. And we've actually had really exciting conversations so far with educators who are already using it. I think that's just so cool. It's not something that like we actually reached out and talked to folks to implement this. This is something that a lot of educators have just started doing on their own. And we're learning every day what these use cases are. And so it's really fun, I think, tomorrow to get to talk through some of these use cases, particularly for folks who are interested but maybe haven't started yet. Okay, on that note, before we jump into Q&A, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen again and Jason to actually talk through some of these exciting new features that we're cooking up for the rest of the year. And as we go through these, Yi's going to be running some polls. So trying to get a sense of like, hey, do you think these are exciting or do you think these are kind of like blah, right? This is really for us, you know, what's really useful is like hearing your feedback ahead of time before we launch these features. So Stephen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm going first. All right, hold on. Let me get back in here. Okay, I think I'm going to show two things here. So this is a preview of some of the incredible PDF image recognition stuff that is rolling out currently. This is kind of mind-blowing. I got these documents from the author Walter Isaacson, who wrote the Elon Musk and Steve Jobs biographies, who's writing a biography of Marie Curie, the Polish-French physicist. And as part of his research, he has this huge collection of her lab journals. And these are scans of handwritten documents from like 1902, written in French. And, you know, there's been no OCR done on these documents. They're just the pixels you see right here. I can't even really make out what it says. Like, you know, I speak a little bit of French, so very hard to read. And you can see this is a journal. They've got dates like 19th of October at the top, lots of numbers. And so you can see, I just want to show you the power of this stuff. Even though there's scrawled French notes and I'm writing in English, I can translate and explain Curie's observations from the 23rd of October. And so then it says Curie's observations from October 23rd are recorded across pages 17 and 18 of the source document, Curie's Lab Journals PDF. And initially I thought, well, that's weird because there's only like 5 pages in this document. That doesn't make any sense. It must have messed up. And then I realized that someone had handwritten 17 here on this little page, which is actually accurate. I figured out this is the page. And so it goes through, it just, you know, translates fluently from the French. It describes like what it's trying to do. It figures out all the context of it. It's also very good at suggesting what it doesn't necessarily know. It says things like Curie continued to experiment. She appeared to be focused on understanding how the thickness of the lead. So it's inferring this information, but it's also signaling that it's not entirely sure. I mean, it's just the idea that a model can do this now. This was unthinkable just a year ago. And so basically, we have this kind of extraordinary ability now to read words, handwritten words, to understand diagrams and charts like this. And you're going to see that now increasingly in all PDF support and in slide support and in docs with images as well. So that's going to be an amazing thing. One other thing you can do is take old newspaper scans that have not been OCR'd, which often comes up when you're doing research for papers, and you can bring those in and it will understand the text. It's really pretty amazing. I want to show you one other thing, which I know everybody has been very eager about since we previewed this at I/O, and that is the audio feature that is coming out later this month. And so I'm just going to give you a little sneak peek. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this. The audio feature will show up in Notebook Guide. You can think of it as an extension of the existing guides we have. So instead of summarizing as an FAQ or a study guide or a table of contents, it will summarize your notebook, your sources, as a podcast style conversation between two people. And we think it's another great way to learn. Some people learn and remember better if information is presented in the form of an engaged, entertaining conversation with storytelling, in addition to just reading a bunch of text. And it's also something you'll be able to download these audio files and carry them around with you if you want to listen while you're driving or walking to school. Okay, so this is a notebook about the invention of the electric light bulb that includes a little bit of material that I actually wrote. And here is just a sample of the audio overview that was generated automatically from these sources.
Hey there, deep divers. Welcome back. Today, we're taking a look at inventions, innovation, and how the stories we tell about them sometimes.
Aren't always the full picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're way more interesting than that usually, right?
Yeah, and we love to glamorize that image of the lone genius toiling away until poof,
Oh, yeah.
they change the world.
So dramatic.
It is dramatic, but as you're alluding to, the reality is usually a lot more interesting.
Right.
Take the light bulb, for example.
Yep.
It's practically synonymous with Thomas Edison, but the story goes, well, the story's much deeper than that.
Okay, so I know a little bit about this.
Yeah.
Like Edison wasn't the only person who worked on electric lights, right?
Not even close. Decades before Edison, there was a whole chain of inventors, each one experimenting, improving, building upon each other's work.
Wow.
It's a textbook case of what we call networked innovation.
Okay,
So you get a sense of what it's like. We have fed some a wide range of documents into this, including some of our internal Notebook LM kind of product feature things, and it's just absolutely hilarious to whatever you give it, it will figure out how to turn it into an entertaining podcast. So we are actively working on that right now. It's a little bit late. Sorry, it's taking a little bit longer than we thought, but it will be out to you in the next couple of weeks. So we really are excited to share that.
Yeah.
Now I'll hand it over to Jason, I think.
Yeah, and just a real quick note on this. I actually saw in the Q&A there was a question about, hey, is this only for education? I actually use it for work a lot. It's funny because I use the audio overviews feature a lot for work, where, we've been talking a lot about use cases, Notebook LM, we look through a lot of data. And what's really funny is I've found that I get a lot of benefit out of just putting everything in a notebook and generating one of these audio guides. And so we'll talk more about, the difference between education use cases and professional use cases. By no means is it limited. I think we're just trying to create these webinars in like a very focused, domain setting so that we can really give you the best of like, hey, we're brainstorming too how you can use it. And hopefully this helps you get started. With that, I'll turn it over to Jason to show us a couple more new features.
Awesome, thank you. Hey everyone, my name is Jason, as Reza just mentioned, and I am the UX designer on this project and super excited to show a few new things, and we're cleaning up the product a lot. But actually, before I dive in, I would love everyone to take 30 seconds to just go click and answer some of these polls. At the bottom right, there's a triangle, square, and a circle. If you want to click on that and click the polls, we would just love to get some of your feedback. And so I'll give everyone just 15 seconds even to click through and answer some of those if you haven't yet. Thank you so much. Cool, cool, cool. I'm seeing those numbers go up. Thank you. Okay, awesome. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Let's pull this up. So I'll let this come up 1 second. Cool. So, we've heard and seen that a lot of you are using Notebook LM for writing, not just to chat, not just the chat feature for Q&A. And so we're exploring a bunch of different options, but we wanted to share one with you today. And so I want to make it clear that what I'm going to share is very much just an early wireframe. The design is not final, but I think it's helpful for us to share it with you and get some thoughts. So as you can see here on the left, I've uploaded a few transcripts from some earnings calls. You can see Alphabet, Microsoft, Tesla. I also have a few notes here on the left side. And so what I'm going to do is click this blue plus, and this feature is tentatively called Live Draft. And I'm going to ask this feature to create a review of key insights from latest corporate earnings calls for these various companies. And each week I highlight one of these takeaways from each company. And I'm doing this for some industry professionals and investors. And so I'm going to click create and save. And it's going to make me a first draft. Once again, this is pulling from my sources as well as my notes. And, I'm going to read through this, and I think it looks pretty good. But I'm going to select this first paragraph here. And I think this looks good, but I actually would love to see some supporting evidence. And so I'll click this button here. And you can see now, we already do in Notebook LM, we have some citations to show where we're pulling this information from. And now I can verify, okay, actually this feels good. I like this, I'm gonna leave this. And I'm now gonna select this third paragraph. And I'm gonna actually, I like this, but I think there may be a better way to word this. Maybe it's another way, another perspective on this take. I'll click alternate takes. And you can see now there's 3 perspectives on this one paragraph. And so I'm going to click through, read through both of these. And I think they like the second one. So I'm going to click enter. And I'm going to drop that in. Now I'm going to add a little intro paragraph. And just for the sake of time, we're going to copy and paste this in. But you can imagine here, I quickly scribbled some of my early thoughts. I didn't know exactly what Alphabet had reported, so I dropped in a few question marks. And this is just scribble. But now what I can do is highlight this bunch of text, and I can click fact check and cite. And so as you can see here, it goes through and says the provided paragraph contains several inaccuracies and requires revision, which is great. And so now if I scroll down, it goes through what I had written and reworded it now more factually. So this is awesome. And I'm going to click replace to drop this in place of what I had written. Now, at the end, I'm going to add a closing paragraph, and I'll write that in, a closing paragraph with a quote from transcripts, and I'll enter. And you can see now, this is what it returns. And this feels pretty good. So I'm going to insert this into my big note here. And so this is feeling pretty good. And now what I want to do to, share share my learnings, I'm going to highlight this whole thing and click on Twitter thread. And you can see now it takes all these paragraphs and condenses it down into a 5-tweet Twitter thread. And so this is just one example of a kind of a fun writing journey that we're thinking through. And we'll answer more questions about this later, but we'd love to hear some of your thoughts on how you would potentially use this in your journeys. Cool. Anyone else want to add anything about writing before I move on?
I just want to add one thing, which is really we're exploring how we can really bring the best of creation grounded in your sources. And we know that there's a lot of journeys that start without sources as well. And so we're doing a lot of exploration around how do we help people get started before they even have maybe primary or secondary sources that they want to use. So one way to think about, I think, writing in Notebook LM in particular is really how can we, make that journey so much easier using the power of search, attaching it to, the power of Notebook LM and then LLMs, and really even finishing to the point of like, you saw Jason showcase, the fact check feature, alternative takes. Hey, transform this into something else. Take this paragraph, make it into a Twitter thread, which I think are really like the main things we hear from people is what they do on a day-to-day basis between school and work. If there are other use cases where you're like, hey, I didn't see you showcase this, but this is actually what I really am trying to do, drop it into the use cases channel in the Discord. Cool. Jason, do you want to jump to the second one? That way we have a little bit of time left for Q&A.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay, cool. So thanks so much. This next feature we're going to share, once again, is an early feature, but we've also heard from a lot of people that when you're sitting in class or you're talking to someone like a tutor, you want to record those conversations to come back to later. And specifically, we've heard a lot of people use voice memos on their iPhone or a voice recorder on Android as well. And so we're going to share a quick prototype of what that flow potentially looks like. I also want to caveat, we're working on improving the mobile functionality of our website, and we're getting there. And so you'll see a bit of a sneak peek of that here as well. So here, I'm going to create a new notebook. I'm prompted to add a few new sources. I'm going to click on Upload Sources. And I'm going to select my class recording here. And this is like a big chunk of time from a physics class that I'm now going to drop into this new notebook. So it uploads those sources and automatically opens the notebook guide. And you can see here, it pulls from the audio recording and breaks down what it heard. It recommends a few questions for me, but a super helpful way for me to parse through a long, kind of blurry voice memo that I took on my iPhone. And you can see this functions like the product on the web today, where I have a few suggested questions here at the bottom as well. But yeah, I think that's, unless you guys want to add anything, we're super excited about this feature, and we're constantly working on new ideas that we hear from you guys. So thank you so much.
Very cool. Thank you, Jason. I'm gonna jump straight into questions since I think we only have 2 minutes left. I did want to say to folks, I see there are a lot of questions in the Q&A feature. What I've been doing is I've been copy pasting these into a document, and as a team, we'll answer those offline and just share it back in the Discord. So rest assured, we've read all these questions, or we're going to, and then we'll be answering them along with some of the other ones that were unanswered from the survey, just because we ran out of time. But I'll answer a few of these really quickly. Will NotebookLM be adding custom instructions? And this one's really exciting. Do you want to answer it, Stephen?
Yeah, we're thinking about this on a lot of different levels. Like in one obvious place could be in Notebook Guide, maybe you have another format that you use all the time. And so in addition to FAQ, you would create your own kind of default format that would sit up there next to Briefing Doc. We also we've experimented with different kinds of system instructions for the model. So maybe you want more of a interactive tutor and less of a kind of research assistant mode. And so there might be kind of different personas that you could tweak. So, and there are also just kind of common prompts that people use all the time that they would want to be able to store in the chat that you would invoke. So I think you'll see variations of that coming, over the next quarter or two.
That's good. This was a good one. Will NotebookLM remain a free product? What new features do you anticipate for the next year? So NotebookLM is a free product. The product as you use it today is the free offering. As we launch new features, NotebookLM is an experiment today. I think for us, the nearest milestone is to get out of experiment status. And we have a lot of milestones that we want to hit before we do that. And then I think when you consider the next step, perhaps there's like a premium offering with premium features, but that's quite a bit down the road for us. Okay, I think we are at time. I know there's like a bunch more questions. I want to answer one last one, which is NotebookLM does not generate diagrams. I see most of the models struggle with this. Diagrams are really crucial. Oliver, do you want to answer this one? Diagrams are crucial. Are you going to be able to support that in the future?
Generally, like a lot of this is kind of predicated on the base models we're using. You should see that like there is some capability here today. The main problem that Notebook is going to run into here is that this kind of goes back to the multimodal PDF kind of problem of like, if you have diagrams that are embedded inside of documents today that also have lots of text in them, we can sometimes lose track of these. Maybe a kind of pro tip hack that works today is that for diagrams and also tables, you'll generally get the best sort of performance if these are in Google Docs today. We actually do a pretty good job on extracting inline kind of media from Google Docs and inline tables from Google Docs. So I think for now in the short term, that is like sort of the best approach. Eventually, we'd like these to kind of just work seamlessly without you having to think about it.
Just to be clear on the question, I'm not sure, they may be asking whether we can generate diagrams, not just interpret diagrams. So.
Oh, yeah.
I think right now, for the short term, output is text-based for a while, but the underlying model Gemini here, which is, such an extraordinary model, it is developing all these amazing multimodal abilities that are improving like practically every month. And so the idea that you might have output, just like we have audio output coming momentarily, the idea that you might have other forms of visual output, like a diagram, for instance, would obviously be a natural next step for us, but nothing on the short-term roadmap on that front.
I'm sorry, we are out of time. There are so many more questions. I did promise and we will deliver. I will copy paste all of these into a document and I will return them to you in the next couple of days. This has been super fun. Thank you so much for your attendance. We plan to do more of these. And I think for the use cases specific section, we'll start recording videos of those that we can share. Since we didn't record this one because of like the sneak preview, but we will start sharing more videos specifically on those use cases and Steven's prompts that he uses in particular.
Like Magic Pro.
Magic prompts, it'll make you smarter.
And maybe we'll share the ambassador
Yeah,
link.
we'll share the ambassador links. They're in the Discord,
they're in the
they're in
Discord,
the chat. But yeah, we'd love to work more closely with you all and really, giving early access to some of the sneak preview stuff that we showed today too. With that, I'm gonna zoom out so you can see everyone in the room, but thank you, everybody. See you next time. See you tomorrow. Bye.